Hey YouTubers, thanks for coming back. Just a quick little addition to my required reading books. And the subject this time still has a slight relation with Star Wars, and I'll get to that. But obviously, as you can see in some of the titles here, I'm talking about UFOs and extraterrestrial existence and other forms of life on other planets, and is that possible? And what's the realities in the way of our government with things, and these are the best books that I have on the subject. I've read a lot of books on subject. I have many more than this, but I chose these books to kind of just outline as best I could the where I think the best examples of the information is in our daily life, and good examples to really build a good healthy skepticism, but still maintain an open mind, and and where it comes into our favorite pastime in sci-fi stories of Star Wars, which lo and behold is dealing with other planets and other ascension entities and technologies, and interacting with other species. I mean, it's not an unheard of topic or subject, but just a couple books. I'm not really going to go into their details inside them too much, because it's something you should just read if you want to read them. But suffice it to say that most of these books do have and present diagrams, pictures, things like that, of examples of what they're talking about. So that is there, and that's good. It's just not all text. So there's a lot of visual aids in the books, and I've read these books back to back many times, so I'm very familiar with all of them. So I'm just going to start with the first one, though, over here by Philip Corso, The Day After Roswell, released in 1997, July 1997, right at the height of the Mars rover landing popularity that was going on, and reinvigorating space coverage in the world, and our internet technology and so forth, really kind of gearing up at that point, and really everything was exploding again as far as information, and just access, and it was a thing. This point in time, we really kind of had a really big movement forward in information age and space exploration, and the interest in it. But I started with this book because, again, I'm saying keeping an open mind, but still some skepticism. This book is written by a real person in the Army, in the research and development section of the Army over the years from the 50s and the 60s and 70s, dealing with the UFO crash in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947, and picking up and trying to make more out of what the government had tried to do as far as figuring that thing out and researching the technology and trying to get something from it. And in the book, he does talk about that process and how they went about reverse engineering a lot of the technologies, seeding them down into our government, or out to our American technological companies, without them knowing, so that they would think that they came up with these designs on their own and patent them, and then the American public would accept that more easily than if the government said, this technology was based off of a UFO that we found in the desert. And it goes into the processes on how the government had to hide a lot of this, because they feel that the alien threat was actually real, and they were developing defensive weaponry for that fact, and all of that, providing a lot of plausible information. That's just the best I could say. I mean, real documentation of things that the government was doing as far as building plans to build moon bases, and research projects, and mentioning of certain upper level government official groups that were involved in things. And it all sounds wacky and sci-fi, and that's kind of what we're talking about. But the fact is, you believe them or not, that a lot of this information is real, disclosed, and unclassified information. There he is there. He had been in his 80s when he wrote the book, so he wasn't really worried about what anybody thought of him, if he was going to get in trouble for saying what he said. And, as he's talking about in the back here, that just basic examples of some of the technologies that we supposedly reverse engineer from the saucer, as far as circuit chips and fiber optics and lasers and CD technology and things like that, night vision, high-tech weaponry, and so forth. So, and he presents it in a very, very nice, clean, easy to read manuscript. But the only thing I would say, or two things that I would say, really is, after reading this a few times, you get to kind of hear his point of view, and he just seems a bit opinionated, because he's coming from the old school, everything's a threat to our national security, and that's how they approach everything. So not having more of a, even though he had an open mind to accept what he's dealing with, he did not have an open mind to say, well, is this really a threat or not? And he came at it with just a little hot, on the, he thinks that they were hostile and thinks they still are, as far as the aliens, and that they mean to hurt us and take our planet and our resources, and we have to defend ourselves. So it sounds a little whacked out, and if you are more skeptical than not, you would probably feel the same way. But that's one thing. He just seemed a little opinionated about it, rather than I would think a balanced a way of presenting the information. But also the way that the information is presented. Because there was so much information in here, he did go into a lot of behind the government processes, the way things work, but it still was somewhat of to just accept the information as is and just move on, which isn't that, but it just kind of has that feel. So, I mean, if I were to say anything about the book, the positive is that it does present a lot of plausible, real, genuine government information on the subject. So you can take it that way and maybe not really worry about how you think he feels about it, just whether he feels good or bad about it, the information's there. So it's a good read on the making a case for this subject side of things, and it's a good, it's good for that. So I'm going to slide this back over here and bring out the next book, which on purpose is written by a gentleman, John Alexander, and released in 2011, who was a long-standing military man. I believe he was a general in the Air Force, and was friends with and familiar with Philip Corso, and they had interactions over the years, and nice ones. But John Alexander did not quite agree with some of the way the information was being presented the day after Roswell, and was inspired to write this book to kind of be the skeptical side of things, in the sense of he says just as much, almost in words in the book, that he can't discount the possibility that life exists out there. It's very possible, but he hasn't seen anything that proves to him otherwise. But he's not discounting the proof that it could be, based on everything he's seen. But what he's presenting in this book is the perfect foil or opposite kind of side of the day after Roswell, in the sense of real aspects of the government processes, as far as how much time, money, resources the government is really spending on just normal day-to-day activities just to keep society and the government running, much less dedicating trillions of dollars to black op technologies and researches and programs for UFO research and covering up UFO information, and that we've been talking to aliens and so forth. He didn't really find a lot of explanations by his own research to really prove that. He can't disprove that some of this stuff may be happening, so he acknowledges that, but it's a very refreshing kind of, and just interesting, regardless of it if it was UFOs, just a very interesting look into the government, the way the government does things, and how labored and bloated and bogged down the government really is in everything it does, much less, again, dedicating all kinds of unaccounted money for things like UFO research and cover-ups. So a good, very, very good companion, as a word I guess I was looking for, to the day after Roswell. So on the subject of are there aliens? Do we have their technology? Are they here? Are they hostile or not? These two books, I think, really should be read together, and they're the best at giving you both sides of that story on a very factual, practical level, from people in the government, in the military, who are dealing as directly with that subject within the government as we have had access to knowing about. All right. Although out of the two, I do prefer this book a little bit more as a read, just because, like I said, of just the more real insight into the government, the way things happen. He doesn't really go too much. Of course, it doesn't really go too much into that as much as Alexander does, but he does. But just out of the two, there's a little more insight on just government information, which is interesting. So, kind of moving out of this guy altogether. This book here, this particular physical book here is a compendium of 3 books from Eric von Daniken, a Dutch researcher and author and scientist, who over the years from the 60s into the 70s and 80s had written and released a lot of books on documentation of the proof of alien visitation to Earth over the years, from ancient cave drawings and manuscripts, including the Bible and other things like that, up until present day, which, by the way, I mean, if you're in research any of this or familiar with any of this information, the show Ancient Aliens is very heavily based on Eric von Daniken and his work. So that might just tell you enough about it anyway. But this is a very interesting compendium, because 3 different books that he has that were based off of this. This one is called, the compendium is called In Search of the Gods, or I think sometimes it was called In Search of the Ancient Gods. I don't know which one, if there was a separate one or not. But this one has 3 books in it: Chariots of the Gods, which is the most well-known and popular, and Gods from Outer Space, both written in 1968, and Pathways to the Gods, which was a later book written in 81. And then this compendium was released in 89. So his basic information is, we've been visited before, and here's irrefutable proof that people in ancient history have documented these visitations by way of cave drawings and old manuscripts and architectures and structures that we're finding during archaeological digs. Nothing is really disputing the existence of that information or those things, but where sometimes he gets and has been criticized very often was his presentation of the subject isn't as scientific as it probably should have been presented in a very unbiased way, and providing a little more information on how the study to try and make sure that there's nothing influencing the information, that it's just strict study and on the subject. His information was a lot more just take it as a matter of fact and just here it is. But what he's presenting can't really be ignored, because that these things are all true. Everything he mentions, where he's finding the sources, these things do exist. How you take it, how you explain it, how you feel about it, whether or not it's true, isn't really it's not really getting into that aspect. It's just, here it is, what do you think about it? I think this is an important book on the subject, because it rounds out kind of a human history of well, again, whether you like it or not, there are cave drawings of guys, of a human sitting in some sort of vehicle, with what appears to be smoke coming from the outside, from the back of it, pointing up to the sky. A lot of things like that. There's some things that we can kind of just interpret how we want, but there's a lot of other things that are just, it is what it is, but there's no explanation for it. So that's, I guess, where that's at. But it just gives me a good rounded off way of filling in kind of the gaps and so forth of the subject. Excuse me. So, and again, it's just an interesting read. It's older information. I mean, this is he's written books since, and he's been in the public since, and on the Ancient Alien show since. So a lot of the information that he has in here and the processes have been updated or outdated, but it's still an interesting read, because a lot of the information is still very current. So I just think it's a good side book to have on the subject. So slide him back in here and get the tie-in, which I went in my other video about required reading. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, because I did talk about it earlier with that. But the Science of Star Wars, because from a real scientific point of view, acknowledging what is our possibility and capabilities of finding other planets, and what would alien life look like and what are the chances of alien life all being bipedal, humanoid, as we normally see most of the time, or just things like that. Super interesting book, with it, because it's a very unbiased scientific point of view on a lot of the subject of other planets and other life forms and within the Star Wars universe, but how it would apply in our real world. So just wanted to bring that back out. But wrapping things up, this other book here, from Carl Sagan. You may or may not know who that is. He wrote this book in 1980, I believe, Cosmos. And Carl Sagan is kind of, he's more on the lines of John Alexander, and has openly kind of scorned Philip Corso's approach as not being scientific enough. And I understand that. So I'm not making a case against Corso on that, just commenting on it. But this is a reprint, obviously. I didn't have the original one, but it's the physical one, so it's got the little badge that it's the 30-year anniversary of it. But the reason I'm finishing with this book is that Carl Sagan goes over an overview of the universe as we knew it at the time. Things have changed, and we've had updates on a lot of this information since. But the information in the book is still, I would just say, yeah, you have to read this, because this is really setting up the basics of what we know now in a very easy to read and very intelligent way. And it's just a classic. I mean, God, if you're in this subject matter, you don't come talk to me unless you've read Cosmos. Anything else, okay, fine. But if you haven't read this, we're not having a conversation until you get this under your belt. Then come talk to me. So for me, it's that level of just the basics if you're going to have this subject matter or be involved in it. It's very readable. It's is just a lot of wording, a lot of information. You kind of need to have a good vocabulary in your head, because there's a lot of stuff in here that you would just have to go back and research and reread. What did he say? What is that? What does that mean? So, that being said, it's still the starting point for me on the subject of space, and just the actuality of space and what goes on in space and what we know about it, and how would that apply to, okay, so here's what we know about space. How plausible is any of this based off of what we know out of these two books, really? The astrophysicist and the scientist pretty much kind of saying, you know what, this is the way we know things are, this is the way we know things work, and these things would be, well, okay, based on that, how do these ideas fit, and can they? And make up your own mind until we know more, if we ever do. So, so I just find a lot of this very interesting to read, and especially if you're a fan of the subject and science fiction. And hopefully you get somewhere with that if it's interesting. And let me know what you think. As always, like and subscribe. Keep it civil. Talk to you later.